တိုင်းပြည်2020ပြည်သက်ကြီးမင်္ဂလာပါခင်ဗျာဒီတစ်ခေါက်မှာတော့ Federal နိုင်ငံတွေမှာကြုံတွေ့ရတဲ့ပညာရေးဆိုင်ရာကိစ္စရပ်တွေကိုအမေးမြန်းဖို့အတွက်မလေးရှားနိုင်ငံကပေါမောက္ခ Francis ကိုဖိတ်ခေါ်ထားပါတယ်ခင်ဗျာ
Professor Francis မင်္ဂလာပါ
မင်္ဂလာပါ
Yeah, you are an expert on the federalism and education. So, can you explain a bit about what is a federal country? Because we are now transitioning into federalism. Formerly, we are a unitary state, but now we try to become a federal union, federal structure. So, can you explain a bit about what is a federal country?
Yeah, the federal system basically is a country where they try to find a balance between shared rule for common interests, everybody, and they balance it with self-rule for minority and regional interests. So it's not just everybody shares together, it's not everybody on their own, but it's finding a balance between these two. And what is the right balance? So this is a system that's practiced by about 25 countries in the world. These are huge, bigger countries: America, Canada, Australia, India, Nigeria, but also Malaysia, and also Brazil and Argentina and these countries. So they feel that this is a very useful system, especially when you also have a multi-ethnic, multi-religious population. And then, because you get, these people then can do their self-rule in terms of religious activities or education or whatever. But, when it comes to questions of national security, currency control, international trade, ASEAN affairs, that one is national. So it's finding that kind of a balance. So, like I said, 25 countries in the world do this. The concept here is also in federalism, we believe in a concept called subsidiarity. Subsidiarity, basically means that if the lower level of government can do a particular job efficiently, then the higher level, which should be able to do it, but they should back off. Let the lower level, which is doing it efficiently, conduct the job. That's how you distribute that. And traditionally, in federal countries, macroeconomics, high politics, national security, immigration affairs, these kind of law and order, and then industrial policy, international trade. These are all usually assigned to the center, the union government. And traditionally, things which are very close to ordinary people, the delivery of goods and services like health services, education services, employment, job opportunities, welfare services, these are assigned to lower level of government, which is the state or region, or even in some places, local government. So this is, in a sense, in a nutshell, what federalism is about. Again, I just want to say, finding the correct balance between shared rule for common national interest and self-rule for minority regional interests.
You mentioned the education and health services in the federal country, so let us move to the education. So what is education like in a federal country? So what is the role of education in federal countries?
Yeah, traditionally, education will be assigned to the region or state or province or landa or canton, whatever the name can be, and they have autonomy over educational matters. Interestingly enough, what has happened is that over time, they have discovered that no, you cannot do it all on your own. You have to actually bring in central government to play a role. So I'll give you an instance. For instance, India, 1935 Government of India Act onwards, education was assigned to the local level. Madras Presidency, Calcutta, Bombay and all that. But in 1976, they discovered, and this was then put in the constitution. 1976, they discovered that, we need the help of federal. So they actually made education something called now shared. It's shared between federal and state. It's in a different list now. It is not in state list or federal list. It's actually in the composite shared list. So the federal government then begins to play a role. And the educational system, in a federal system, you give a lot of attention to actually interstate relations between the top and the bottom and the second level. You're also very concerned about what is the relationship between, say, for instance, Gujarat and, Bihar or some other state, Madras. So you are very concerned about these interstate relations. And generally, when it comes to education at the schooling level, elementary school, secondary school, these are invariably controlled by the state government.
Is it fundamentally different from education in, like, say, unitary countries?
Actually, if you put it that way, today they are not very different. Because actually, because both sides, whether you're a unitary country or whether you're a federal country, both sides have decided that actually decentralization is very, very good and useful. So this is something that has evolved over time. But originally in federal countries, they were ahead of the unitary countries in terms of decentralization. So India's case, for instance, since 1935, colonial times, already decentralized. They put in the constitution, state is in charge of education. But 1976, they decided that actually, no, we need the help of federal, of union. So now federal is also involved increasingly in education. What is the balance? How do they do this? Primary school education, secondary school education, very often the teaching of your language, your literature, your culture is taught at the state level. However, when it comes to tertiary level education, it can be shared. Some schools continue to teach in Tamil or Gujarat, then it is controlled by state government. But in India's case, for instance, they introduce, I don't know if you're aware of this, like Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi University, and then the IITs, IIMs, which are all top institutions. These are all federal institutions. And they basically teach in English. Very different from Gujarat, South Gujarat University, which uses actually, Gujarati language. So this one is actually the top institutions. So federal government plays that role. It also runs the Hindu Benares, the Hindu university, and Aligarh Muslim University is also run by the federal government. So the government does this. Apart from that, the central government is involved in maintaining standards. I told you, at the state level, they are in charge of running the schools. But what is the standard? How do you ensure that standards are kept and maintained and that they are competitive, and that they are of a similar level regardless of the state? So the federal government actually plays that role. It maintains, assures, standardization. It's also very involved in actually the cost of education in different states might be different. Because of distance in a place like Kaya State, Loiko, it's so far away from Naypyidaw and all that. So it's more expensive to actually provide per capita education there. The federal government's role is to then, actually redistribute funds from a richer state to a poorer state. Or, in Kachin state, very poor and all that, very difficult terrain and all that. So you actually give more money to them. The federal government, covers the additional costs. And the federal government, increasingly in many places, they will provide for infrastructure development. So, for instance, the Dalits, the women in India or in my country, they cannot go to school because they don't have housing. So the government steps in to build a hostel. or for poor people, you step in to actually provide a midday meal or a glass of milk a day. So the federal government plays these roles of assuring, equity, fairness in the system, but also maintaining standards. But at the local level, teaching your language, your culture, this one we let the state handle. Why? Because they are actually closer to the people than Naypyidaw, than Kuala Lumpur. You know what I mean? So they understand the problems of these people. Oh, and then if the curriculum has some problem, then you can fix the problem. Some teacher is not really performing well, you can actually call up the teacher. Hello, you have a problem. So local level is very important for something like education, which all students, it's compulsory for them. It prepares them for life. It's such an important endeavor. We should actually ask the state to help to play this role. Yeah.
So, good to know the education aspects of the federalism, but I also like to know how education policy can be made. You mentioned that in your previous answer, but I'd like to, ask you this question. How should we formulate the education policy
in federal countries? Because that might be quite different from
what kinds of policy. What kinds of policy?
Okay.
Just for me, actually, in education, the first policy that you should give attention to is actually at the state level, as well as especially in the federal. You must make sure that regardless of people's background, gender, religion, region, make sure that all of them are given an opportunity for increasingly now 11 years of education. Last time it used to be 9 globally. Now it's recognized all schools should give their children 11 years of education so that you prepare them for life. Prepare them for life. So this is one policy, So, you shouldn't have dispute about this by, any individual. It's such a global need, Number 2 policy is actually all nations need to prepare themselves to be competitive in the global economy. So understandably, every country will want to emphasize learning IT, engineering, medicine, so they can be competitive in the global system, managerial techniques. And then they'll invite foreign investments to come in. Oh yes, and they want to learn English, because so we should also make sure that policy making includes this second aspect. First, everybody gets an opportunity. Second aspect, the nation needs good technical expertise, to compete globally. And the third aspect of policy making actually is with regards to promoting national unity, promoting integration, regardless of the fact that we come from different regions, we have different religions, we are different ethnic groups. No, you must find a model wherein you can actually teach people to respect one another, to share with one another, and so on and so forth. In Malaysia, what we do is we have a common curriculum, we have a unified teaching scheme, and we have a common examination system. However, the schools can teach in different languages. This was in the beginning. Later on, it gets changed because in Malaysia, we have had Islamization, we had Malayanization, but at the point of independence, this was the ideal. That we will actually be liberal, we allow people to actually learn their language, but exams, one language. So it promoted this, and English and was also compulsory alongside the national language. So this was how we forged that unity. Common exam, common teachers can be posted all over the place, because you train them similarly, but you can actually teach in different languages. So, for me, these are like the 3 important policies that should be upheld by developing countries like Myanmar, like Malaysia, like Indonesia, even if they are not federal. Even if they are not federal.
Okay, so here is the question about money. I mean, who should pay for that? You know, in Myanmar, we like to talk about, you know, free education in the country, and our education, I mean, the fees for the education is still quite low. So, I mean, who should pay for this? You know, the ones that you mentioned. I mean, individuals, state governments, union government. Who should pay for that?
It's very fundamental. I think the concept of federalism is, you know, actually the one who provides the function, who makes decisions about this, should actually pay for it.
Okay.
This is a follow-up concept of federalism, and you also get to collect. You know, if you need to, you know, you get to collect fees and all that. It goes to the state government or to regional government or to union. So this is, but for me, elementary, secondary school education, the ideal should be free education for all. And it should be shared by federal and union, by union and state governments. It should be shared. I mean, these are our children, you know, regardless. And that's why I say at the same time, if there is a lag in Kaya state or in Kachin state, then it becomes the responsibility of the federal or union government to actually allocate additional funds there. Because the cost of education there is per capita more, higher. You know, and you can't expect a poor state like Kaya or, you know, Arakan or, you know, or Kachin to actually take care of these things. You know, actually they need federal help. So this is how I look at it. Now, when it comes to university education, it's a bit more complex, because university education in the first place is so much more expensive. You know, and if you want to be very good, you can become as expensive as Harvard or Yale or London School of Economics. So it can be very, very expensive. Okay, so in this regard, actually, later on, you know, we might be able to talk about this later on a bit. We can go private, but at the same time, I think the responsibility of higher education is primarily that of the federal government, of union government. Even if you have a Shan State University in Tongji, you know, which uses Shan language and all that, the federal should actually come along to help support this. You know, and actually in Myanmar is such a rich country. You know, you're probably not collecting your taxes enough from all the rich people. So you improve your tax collection scheme, collect higher taxes, you know, from the people who make a lot of money. Plus, you should also begin to divert some of your allocations for defense and national security to basic fundamental needs like people's education, people's health. And your country potentially is such a rich country. This shouldn't be a problem. It's wrong allocation.
Yeah, so yeah, in the past we only have public education. Now we have like private schools and also even the international schools coming in. But the education, as I understand, is another function of the education in country is that nation building, right? So the coming of, you know, international schools or the private schools, how do we handle them in federal countries? Yeah.
I am generally not in favor of privatizing education at the primary, secondary school level. You know, I think, but I am not opposed to privatization at the tertiary level.
Okay.
Yeah, because we need sometimes foreign, it's just like we need foreign investors, you know, we also need foreign help to improve our educational system at the tertiary level. Primary school, secondary school, but this has also begun, the government in Malaysia held back, they refused to allow this to happen for a long time, you know, and then they relented later on, and when they insisted that actually, because invariably these people teach in English.
Okay.
And that's the idea. You know, that's the idea. They want their children to study English schools, and then from English schools, they will go abroad to study their education. So these are very rich
Yeah.
kids generally. And so it's
There's a disconnect with the larger society. Yeah.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think this is a resort we should actually turn to, you know, towards only the last, if you cannot provide for them. I think it is more important
Okay.
to actually upgrade our schools. You know, personally, in the case of Myanmar, I would like to see you all like upgrade, you know, restore some of the good schools that you all used to have in the past. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
fortunately, you shut up all these because they were mission schools, you know, and so on and so forth. But actually, it might be time to, you know, redesign them so that they serve national purposes. But you know, because there are good traditions there, and yeah, and when you decentralize education, you can tap into some of these other stakeholders to help you along. We'll talk about this maybe later. Yeah.
Yeah. So, since you have been to Myanmar and you study Myanmar, you know that we are a transitional country, right? So, with the political and economic reforms, and also from the civil war to the peace transition, I myself have just been back from the Union Peace Conference because I'm invited. So, the educational reforms can, or should promote the political and the economic reforms. So are they in line with each other?
For me, actually, the conflict situation arises when you do not share power, when you do not share the economy, or when you do not respect each other's culture. The worst situation is when they overlap one on top of the other, then it's disaster.
Mm-hmm.
So this is actually, so there should be. So the Panglong Peace Conference, for instance, is very, very important because if you resolve conflict, because of lack of sharing power, lack of sharing the economy, lack of respect for each other's culture, if you can resolve that fundamental problem, then you actually make available a lot of additional funds for education, for health, and for public transport, road systems, ports. So it's actually so vital, you know. So for me, it is not a question of, oh, we do this first before we address education. No, education has to be addressed right now. Maybe you do not, you can emphasize. For me, the important thing is you should start with perhaps elementary school. Make sure it becomes universal. I'm very proud that in Malaysia it's 97%, of enrollment of children of that age are in schools. In India, since 2010, they made education of the children a fundamental right. So, if you don't, actually the child doesn't go to school, you can take the government to court. So we should aspire towards this, and like I said just now when we were talking about, it should be free as well, so so it comes together in a sense. Yeah, we should then in this education system, what we can also do is we can begin to use it to, like we said, promote national unity, but at the same time maybe it's time to maybe have a course in which you actually, after you consult various parties, different states, put an input, a course that actually teaches people to respect one another, a course that tell people that actually peace is so important. It's in line with all our religions, whether you are Buddhist, you are Christian, you are Islam, or you are Hindu. Actually, everybody's religion teaches exactly the same things, and so it's something like this is critical. I think you need to break, and this is something in school you can promote. You can promote, through your extracurricular activities or during the curriculum, you can promote an appreciation of peace. Not just mathematics, learning English, or learning to read and write. No, you can actually use this to promote respect for each other's culture, appreciate peace as opposed to conflict, and so on. Yeah. And they do this.
In terms of,
they do this last
oh,
word.
sorry.
They do this in South Africa. You know, after all this horrible transition, everybody doesn't want to go back to all those apartheid nonsense days. Yeah.
Thank you, Chef Francis, for your wonderful interview. So please visit Myanmar again when this COVID situation is over.
I definitely
Yeah.
will. I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jesu Terima kasih.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Jesu Debar.